Which quarterback are you feeling on Sunday's main slate?
I want to talk more about this beaver. How big is it? Can we set some odds on it?
Yep, these are all
I think
great
this is something we
questions.
should touch on.
You will have to wait until the last block of the show. It's called a tease.
Wow. Well, that'll keep me watching. As for the quarterback position on Sunday, I'm looking to pay up here. Tom Brady in Atlanta against the Falcons is a spot at 7,200 that I'm pretty intrigued by. He already played them once this season in Tampa, had 30 DraftKings points in that game. The matchup sets up pretty comfortably. We're coming off a game where against the Colts, all those points came on the ground. Tom Brady only had 12 DraftKings points on Sunday in a tough road victory for the Bucs in a matchup that set up pretty decently. So Brady hasn't scored 30 DraftKings points since before that bye. He's had 23 or less in 3 straight games since the bye. I think this spot sets up pretty well for a bounce back in the division on the road indoors against a bad team.
What about you, Pearce? You going to pay up?
Yeah, sort of, kind of. I mean, I'm not going to the bottom like we typically do. I'll take it the mid-range with Kirk Cousins. I know Kirk Cousins is an up or down guy. Last week I warned that it seemed like last week was going to be a typical down week, and sure enough, it was for the most part. Well, this should be a bounce-back spot. He's in a better spot than Tampa. Tampa's Tom Brady facing Detroit. He's also going to play indoors. Detroit just has a terrible pass defense. I mean, you look at all the metrics. Depth of target, air yards, yards after catch, just yards period. Every single metric lines up for Kirk Cousins to have a big game. Oh, by the way, Dalvin Cook is hurt. So they're more than likely going to pass more, rely more on Kirk Cousins and his elite wide receiving corps.
Yeah, and speaking of running back, which guy's price point draws and pulls you in, Pearce?
Well, the short answer is you're probably going to want to pay up. Now, if you pay for Tom Brady, it's going to be tough to get these top-tier running backs, but they're sitting there right at the top. They've all performed well. They're all in good spots. So you can't really go wrong with Joe Mixon. You can't go wrong with Jonathan Taylor. And I would even put Austin Eckler in that category based on his ability to receive passes against the Cincinnati team that struggles against receiving running backs. But where I'm going to go, I'm going to try to save some money so that I can at least afford one of those running backs. Is look at Ty Johnson. I know he didn't really do that much last week because he just didn't get the volume. But in his 6 rushes, he had 42 yards. He's also in a good matchup against Philadelphia. They're ranked 21st against the run. They've allowed the 2nd most fantasy points to running backs, 7th most to receiving running backs, which is what his role is supposed to be. He hasn't really seen that yet, and we haven't seen Zach Wilson check down to the running backs very much. It should happen at some point. Also, Philadelphia, 27th in adjusted rushing yards, allowing 4.7 yards per carry. If they just give him the volume, and I don't know why they're messing around with Tevin Coleman, but they are, but he doesn't need that much of a bump in usage to really get over and to work in lineups this week.
Jules, another spot you're going to pay up at running back?
Running back is a position you want to get one of those guys at the top. Like the spot that you can argue Jonathan Taylor's in as good a spot as you'll see for a running back all season. So if there's ever a time to spend that $9,200, and he's almost $1,000 more than any running back on the slate, you can convince me to do that. And if that means finding other, rostering Brady and finding other places to pay down, then sure. Or if you're making me choose between paying up, I think Taylor's the safer spot to pay up, and I'll do what Pearce does and find another quarterback to pay down for and go off Brady. Hopefully find a quarterback that actually lines up under his center and not the guard on 4th down, but nonetheless a spot to pay down. But if I'm paying down a little bit, or at least mid-range at running back, to pair with a guy like Taylor, I like Eli Mitchell on San Francisco. Hopefully the lead job is still all his. We'll see how injuries shake out, but last time out, 27 carries for $133, 30 DraftKings points against Minnesota. And the week before, only with the bye in between, the week before, only 9 DraftKings points against the Rams, but the 27 carries tell you what you need to know. So going against a Seattle defense on a short week that we just saw, doesn't have it anymore. The way Seattle can be attacked through the air easily, but they're pretty bad against the ground game too, among the worst in the league. So if you're telling me that Eli Mitchell is going to be anywhere in the ballpark of the 27 carries that he's gotten in the last 2 games for San Francisco, he's a guy I'm very interested in at $6,000.
Jules, not enough people talk about how John Elway was first to do this like 38 years ago when he was a rookie for the Broncos against the Chargers. You know, everyone's thinking that, you know, the dude in Minnesota, that Kirk Cousins is the first. Oh, no. 4 decades ago, the standard was set. Julian, what do you want to do at wide receiver? You going to pay up? You going to save? You got some value?
I think we almost have to go value here with the way that things have been going in this segment so far. But I will say, like, let's say you don't go with Jonathan Taylor. I think Michael Pittman is kind of a pivot play if Indy does get some points through the air, is an interesting way to go about things. Houston ranks 21st in DraftKings points allowed to the wide receiver position, so it's another route that you can go there. And then Darnell Mooney, he's $5,600. How many weeks in a row can he keep putting up, you know, straight up wide receiver 1 numbers, and we say that we can't roster him because he's on the Bears or we don't know who the quarterback's going to be that week or whatever? Look at his game log. It's 3 straight of over 20 DraftKings points. He has 120 receiving yards plus in each of those last 2 games on 5 receptions, 16 targets in one of those games against Baltimore. Darnell Mooney, until he, you know, has a drop off, he's been a guy that we can kind of trust, and he's still underpriced. It's a game against Arizona that, you know, you're a home dog of a touchdown or more, so a decent game script atmosphere if things kind of go as planned.
Hey, Pearce, Jules is going the value route. I mean, Darnell Mooney here is only $5,600. What do you want to do at wide receiver?
Now I'm going to venture into no man's land with Diontae Johnson at 6,800. If you're paying up for running back or you're paying up for quarterback, it's really going to limit your options at wide receiver. And I imagine most people are going to pay up at running back or quarterback, and they're going to have to save some money at wide receiver. So Diontae Johnson is going to go completely unowned, and rightfully so. There's a little bit of stink surrounding the Steelers at the moment. So you're going to get an explosive receiver who can be elite. That's really not that bad of a matchup with low ownership. And I see a couple scenarios playing out where the Steelers just get boat raced again and they're playing from behind and he gets a ton of targets. Like last week, he got 14 targets in a game that they were never in contention. That could absolutely happen this week against the Ravens. Or somehow, maybe we see the second half Steelers against the Chargers where Big Ben's able to hit the plays that he needs to hit and the offense is effective. And again, you're going to see Diontae Johnson look good against the Ravens team. And the Ravens, we've talked about this all season. Last year, they were middle to bad against pass defenses, or as a pass defense, and they're struggling again this year. Depth of target, yards after catch, missed tackles. They allow a ton of big plays, 51 20-plus yard passes. I think they have the most 40-plus yard passes this season. This is a pass defense that you can attack, and I would imagine that the way the game script goes, they're going. I mean, the Steelers can't run the ball, period, so they're going to have to pass. Johnson should get plenty of volume, and you're going to get low ownership.
Yeah, and now we go to tight end here, guys. It's one of those top-heavy positions, it feels like, every season, at least recently, the past few years. Darren Waller is week to week, is what his interim coach says, so that would leave just one guy $6,000. Will cost you at least $6,000. That's Mr. Mandrew. So, Pearce, what do you do at tight end? Whose price stands out to you?
You got to punt this position this week. I mean, if you pay up a tight end, you're making some serious sacrifices at running back, quarterback, or wide receiver that I don't think you can get away with. So, James O'Shaughnessy, your own Jacksonville Jaguars at 26. Shag Hennessy. I jumped into the game last week when Dan Arnold went down. 5 targets, 3 catches. If you go back before Dan Arnold showed up on the scene, he had 8 targets in that last game, caught 6 of them for 48 yards. He's been around the team for a while. He can get it done. And if you look at the game script here, everyone except for you, maybe, Emerson, expects the Jaguars to be playing from behind. Actually, You probably think that they're
I do. Yes, I have accepted reality. It's true.
So they're going to play from behind. They're going to pass. He'll get the volume to reach value. And I'm completely fine. If he gets into the end zone, great. If he gets 3 catches for 30 yards, I'll take it and hope that I nail the rest of my picks.
Dude, $2,600. I love that, Pearce. Julian, do you agree you can't pay up here because then you'd be sacrificing other more important positions?
No, you definitely can't pay up here, especially with some of the high-priced plays we like at other positions, particularly running back. So I think that the injury to Darren Waller is the most important part of this position. So I mean, he's got a D next to his name in the DraftKings app. Doubtful. We got a lot of week before we get here and actually find out his status. But if he is closer to doubtful in this game, I think that you just go with his backup in Foster Moreau. He's a guy that has played pretty well this season for a Raiders team that isn't strong at wide receiver to begin with, and they've had a lot of moving parts there. You know, you see the one game against the Eagles with 18 DraftKings points, 6 for 60 and a touchdown, caught all of his targets in that game. So he has the potential when the volume is there. He might be a little touchdown dependent, but if Waller's not out there and the Raiders play the way that they've played at wide receiver this season, he's a guy at $2,700 that should be relatively involved. It's a home game against Washington, decent spot. So, you know, you're almost, not that you wish injury, it's not like it's anything serious for Waller. You almost wish that he rests the game to get right here so that you can get some better value, much needed value at the tight end position.
Yeah, and even Waller playing a bit last week, he still saw 5 targets when he decided to fill in there. Jules, before you guys take off here, Christian McCaffrey is out for the season. There's some mixed reports about Dalvin Cook, who could miss a few weeks with a shoulder injury, although his head coach is not even ruling him out for this Sunday. So Alexander Mattison and Chuba Hubbard will almost certainly garner the top 2 claims for our season-long fantasy friends watching right now. Which one would be your priority?
Yeah, it's a good question because we know CMC's done for the season. So Chuba Hubbard is the guy for the rest of the way. So it's, do you want a guy that you know is going to be the starter every week for Carolina and their putrid offense that can't move the ball down the field? Or do you want to find a guy on a good team that knows how to run the ball that you can plug in for Dalvin Cook for a couple of weeks? I know Dalvin Cook isn't out, but he's got the one torn labrum and now the other shoulder is done as well. It doesn't sound great. I will go with quality over quantity here and say that I want Alexander Mattison, because if we do get 2 games out of him in terms of season long, he's a guy you can plug right in and play and get RB1 numbers from and kind of help you make that playoff push. Whereas with the Panthers, CMC is very talented, but you plug a backup in for him and it's just not the same, especially when that offense isn't moving the ball. So I'll go with Minnesota's offense over Carolina's offense essentially here.
Yeah, Jules, and Madison recorded more than 100 yards in both of those starts without Cook earlier this season. Pearce, what about you? Any chance you want to go over to the Panthers side, despite that offense just looking atrocious right now?
Yeah, no, we've talked about the Panthers' offense being terrible all season. We knew ahead of time that they had offensive line issues. They had offensive line issues every season, and it's a miracle that CMC can make stuff happen in that backfield. It's going to be a lot harder on Hubbard. It's going to be a lot harder on Cam Newton. And that's the reason why you don't want to take Hubbard in a vacuum, but it's not in a vacuum. We know that at the end of the season, there's a good chance that Dalvin Cook's going to be back. So if you're already going to make the playoffs and you're locked into the playoffs, then I would go with Hubbard, thinking that, well, maybe you'll be able to use him at the end of the season. You're not going to be able to use Cook, or you're not going to be able to use Madison because Cook will probably be back. Now, if you are trying to make the playoffs and you're on the fringe, then you definitely go with Madison. He's the better running back. He's in a better offense that can move the ball. He doesn't have to worry about Cam Newton poaching touchdowns from him. So short run, it's Madison. If you're already in the playoffs, you're going for the long run. I would go with Hubbard. You may not use him, but it would be nice to have him there on your bench at least.